Welcome to the Niftyist Podcast. This is the show where we get inside the minds of the visionaries, creators, and architects building the world of Web3 and NFTs. I'm JT, aka Niftyist, your host and the host of the Niftyist TikTok, blog, and other things. I'm an NFT collector and creative, And before I introduce our amazing guest, let me just address a couple of important bits of housekeeping, not house cleaning. A disclaimer first, the Niftyist Podcast is for educational and entertainment purposes only, and nothing in the show should be taken as investment advice. If you do choose to purchase NFTs or cryptocurrency, please do so at your own discretion after having done your own thorough research and with the knowledge that NFTs and cryptocurrencies are volatile markets that involve a high degree of risk. You should also know that as an NFT collector myself, I do own an NFT by today's guest, who I'm excited to introduce now. Please welcome Lee Mason, aka Metageist. Metageist has been a graphic. Hey Lee. Metageist has been a graphic and web designer and illustrator for 20 years. After discovering VR art programs, he pivoted to focus on creating art for the metaverse with metaverse native tools. Since getting into the NFT space in February of 2020, Lee has come to see himself as a world builder, storyteller, and digital sculptor. Thematically, many of Lee's works explore his fears of us disappearing into digital realities while the old world collapses around us. Lee is on all major NFT platforms as a creator, as well as a keen collector and curator of digital art. You can find Metageist on Instagram as Metageist _, that's METAGEIST _, and on Twitter at Metageist VR. I highly recommend visiting his social media channels now if you're not familiar with his work already, so that you can get an idea of some of the really awesome projects he's involved in and that we'll be talking about throughout the show. Lee Mason, aka Metageist, welcome to the Niftyist Podcast.
Thank you very much. Happy to be here. Looking forward to it.
Yeah, me as well. We actually met last year at Dreamverse, which was concurrent with NFT NYC. We actually ran into each other a number of times and had a lot of great conversations.
Right. Yeah, we did.
Yeah. So as I was putting together this podcast, I thought you would be an awesome first guest because I knew we would have a whole lot to talk about. And you are involved in so many really, really awesome projects that I'm really excited to talk about today. But before we just get into that, I have to ask you the basic question. Where does the name Metageist come from?
Yeah, you do get asked that often. And it's something that surprises people. It was actually something that I came up with many, many years ago when I started. I quit my job as a photo editor for a holiday company, making holiday brochure photos look a lot better than they really are. To go freelance as an illustrator and a graphic designer, and I was trying to think of a name for the company, a name for the brand that hadn't been used before, and I just remember spending quite a few days trying to think of words. And me and a friend that I was starting the business with one night came up with Metageist by accident. I think we were thinking about like Ghost in the Machine or something like that, along those lines, about ghosts and about simulations and fractals and all that sort of geeky stuff. And weirdly enough, yeah, it just came up, and I had a business for a little while. It went pretty badly because I was like very young and very naive, and I thought like customers were just going to appear out of nowhere. So it was quite a tricky period. But I sold a lot of skateboards and I sold a lot of t-shirts. And I did some album covers, and I did some websites, and I did some animation.
There you go.
And then I shelved Metageist and didn't use it for a long time, well over a decade. And then when I learnt about NFTs, I figured like this is full of so much weird vernacular, and it's a little bit intimidating for people. And I'm working in schools and hospitals and doing charity work, and I thought I want to come up with a pseudonym. And then I thought Metageist, Metaverse, like a character in a pseudonym in the Metaverse. Metageist is perfect. I've still got the .com, and I just brought it back up and started using it again. And the logo is based on night terrors that I used to have as a kid, where I used to see those shadow people when I had like sleep paralysis. And I've just taken ownership of these characters that terrified me as a kid, basically.
Wow.
So that's where that came from.
So you're telling me that the name came back to you like a ghost from your past?
Pretty much, exactly that. Yeah.
Even
now
before...
I just love it. I think it's brilliant, and my sort of long-term plan is to have the Metageist like create all sorts of architecture and spaces and characters and animals, all sorts of things in the metaverse that will outlive me, and so there'll be this Geist left behind long after I'm gone.
Oh heck yeah, I love that. That's amazing. Oh, that's so fortuitous that you already had like the perfect name chosen in advance. What a prophecy. Very briefly, I wonder if you could just rattle off a couple of your projects that you think you're best known for, just to give people an idea of those as we jump right into the interview after.
Yeah, sure. I was lucky enough to get into Super Rare quite early, so I've got a few sort of one-on-ones on there. But then when it really sort of blew up was getting onto Nifty Gateway about a year and a half ago, and I've got a few. I really wanted to get onto Nifty Gateway because they had these really interesting drop mechanics. One of which is the blind packs, where you don't know which one you're going to get when you purchase a pack, and that became quite popular. I did two collections of Metaphyla. They were there's a couple of sort of threads all the way through all of my work, like that goes sort of chronologically, and it's all sort of reflecting on evolution in a simulation, and that's essentially what a lot of my work is about. It's about the metaverse, it's about simulations, it's about digital landscapes and digital life forms and things like that. And so the Metaphyla were sculpted in virtual reality. Most of my work, pretty much all of my NFT work is sculpted in virtual reality. So it's created in the metaverse in a certain sense. It's metaverse native, and the Metaphyla are sort of like trying to show some love to the little creatures and the animals, and the things that are forgotten in the real world, in terms of like bugs and deep sea fish and some of the weirder creatures that I think are really cool, but you don't sort of see anyone doing anything very much with them in the NFT space. There's cool. lots of utopian stuff. There's lots of humanoids and all that sort of stuff, and I just wanted to sort of bring some of that in. So that was quite popular. And the other thing was the Cyclops project, which was really, but we'll get into that in a bit probably. But that's one totally. I'm most excited for.
Awesome. Yeah, and that's where I discovered you on Nifty Gateway. I think that was my on-ramp early last year into NFTs. I think it was for a lot of people as well, especially because they make it so easy to buy NFTs with a credit card and not have to figure out all of cryptocurrency at once. Great. Okay, so let's get into it. So let's talk about Dreamverse. This is where you and I met last year. Just a quick summary for people who aren't familiar. Dreamverse was an event held in New York City last year that was put on by Metacovan, who was infamously the buyer of Beeple's Every Day is the First 5,000 Days, which Metacovan bought at auction for $69 million. It was very much a statement from him about legitimizing, or the legitimacy rather, of NFT art as art. Dreamverse seemed to be an extension of that project. It was a physical gallery of not just graphic NFTs, but also AR, VR, and I would say experiential NFTs as well. They did some really interesting things actually with that Beeple piece that he had purchased. It was the first public debut of that piece. And Lee, you were asked, along with I think 9 other people, to be a curator of that event, which is very cool. Congratulations. So I wonder if you could just tell us about your experience with Dreamverse, and your thoughts on it briefly, because I think there's probably a lot to talk about there.
Yeah, sure. It was an honor. It was a very, very exciting time. The Dreamverse night itself represented like a the pinnacle, like the crescendo, I suppose, of months of work previously to that. Because in my infinite wisdom, I thought it would be good to have a Nifty Gateway drop on the same day. So it was a pretty sort of like, well, the day it was the day after, basically. So it was basically the same time. So for me, it was incredible. You know, I met Tubador and Metacoven in CryptoVoxel. So like, I met these people at events during lockdown in the Metaverse.
Wow.
Got on with them. Tubador and I both bought the same voxel trainers in an auction in CryptoVoxels. It was a really, really exciting time. This was like, I was kind of like just past the really early days, but still quite early in the NFT space, and enough to sort of like be part of what felt like a very special, small little, you know, niche of this, but with so much optimism about the future. It was a really cool sort of time. Anyway, Tubador and I got on really well. He, Metaverse were one of my first collectors. They collected one of my first pieces on Super Rare, a piece that I'm really proud of, and which is a 3D piece that you can put up in VR, and it's like a bandstand, but it plays music, and there's a whole backstory to that. But
I love that.
So when they reached out and asked if I would be a curator, that was very exciting to me. And I was in the UK. We weren't allowed to travel. The only way to get there was to spend 2 weeks in other countries. So I laundered myself in Barbados for a fortnight to get to New York.
I think a lot of people did that week.
Yeah. So by the time Dreamverse happened, it was 3 weeks in of traveling and stuff like that, and it was really good. They did it really well. I've been to quite a lot of NFT events now, and that is by far the best. They did make it artist first. It was all about the art, and I thought that was really cool. And the screens were very good, and screens can often be disappointing at these things. And the collection of art was just phenomenal. There was hundreds and hundreds of pieces of art from some of the very best artists in the crypto art space. So yeah, it was a highlight of last year. Absolutely, like a really good time.
Yeah, that was really awesome. I was really impressed with the diversity of media that they showcased, because as you say, I mean, like so much of the art that especially in the NFT world we're already familiar with collecting is just two-dimensional on a screen, mostly videos or GIFs, I would say, but there were things beyond that. There were AR installations, there were people walking around with iPads that let you visualize things in the space that you were in, all sorts of things. So that was really cool. And in your role as curator, how did you influence how Dreamverse came together?
So we were just sort of reached out to individually by Tubador and Brooke from the Metaverse team, and just said, can you choose 10 artists, anybody you like? You can also obviously put your own stuff up. We were given like a lot of time, and I just sort of had this great sort of opportunity to sort of pick a bunch of artists that I felt like were some of my favourites in the space, some of the nicest people, some of the hardest working, some are underrepresented. And you know, it was like full acceptance. It was like, whoever you want, just give us the names, we'll do all the rest. They made it very
amazing.
Easy, and so it's nice to sort of like play a part in like sort of 10% of the show was what were artworks that I'd chosen, as well as some of my own as well. And
who were some of those people that you selected?
Lucas Aguirre, one of them, I think. He does virtual reality artwork. Jason Duckmanton, Rosie Summers, who's a VR artist, and only done a handful of things in the NFT space. Her piece was up there as well. Who can I think? Sparrow Reed. I think she was one of them, but potentially she'd been picked by somebody else. I was curating 3 shows at the same time at this point, so like there's a few sort of cross. That was the big one, and then there was the Cyclops one, and then there was the one for First Dibs as well in New York. So. So there was a bunch of people, but I don't want to get the names wrong now. So.
Yeah, sure. Well, there was a really interesting episode, an unfortunate episode that happened at Dreamverse, which I wanted to hear from you. And that was that actually one of your physical artworks was stolen from Dreamverse. And which I found shocking, and also because I was a little bit aware of that project already, and you know, we had talked about like what you had done with it. So when you announced that it was stolen, I was shocked, and I was also shocked that it wasn't really talked about more. So could you tell us? What was that piece, and what was the physical aspect of it that you had on display?
Oh, okay, yeah. So that was the Basilisk. It was the auction, the one of one, that was part of the Nifty Gateway drop during those 2 days. It was a physical 3D printed piece. I sculpted it in virtual reality. It was a cobra, I suppose, with an augmented reality head. What that meant was that it was 3D printed, and then it was literally electroplated in gold. It was a gold plated sculpture.
Wow, I didn't realize that was gold on the exterior. That's amazing.
Yeah, it's metal plated. And it was very hard to make, harder than you might think. It was a tough call. It was a lot of back and forth and a lot of errors and things like that to get it to New York on time. And it got to New York like 2 days before the event, and I hadn't seen it because I'd only seen like a failed prototype. So
this was a one of one both in the metaverse and in real life. You only produced a single.
Yeah, I've remade it since, because of course,
sure.
Well, we'll get to that, but what's funny about it and weird is that it looks like something that gets stolen in like Indiana Jones. Like it looks like it looks like an ancient Egyptian artifact. It's like a golden cobra. It's got a magic. You point your phone at it and it comes alive and it plays music. A friend of mine made some art using actual water and light to make a cinematic animation, which he made by putting a thimble of water on a speaker and playing music, and so it was a video loop for the face. It's hard to explain without sort of showing it, and then it was music made by a collaborator of mine, Vari, and Nikki. She made the music, so there was 3 of us involved. I arrived at Dreamverse on the morning of the event. I wasn't allowed in before then to check the sort of presentation. It wasn't really sort of. I'd asked for it not to be put in a case because it was interactive. But it was also sort of just like left on a table, and so there's a few that I feel like I was naive, I was naive not to say this needs to be out of reach somehow, or I need to be with it all night, or someone needs to be with it all night, or whatever. And of course it turned from a gallery into a club night very abruptly. And suddenly everything changed, and I was a few drinks in, and I was mingling and chatting to people, and then before I knew it, it had gone, and it was sort of crushing. Then it was funny, and then everyone thought it was amazing. It was like, this is perfect. Like, you've had a heist. Metageist became the hashtag for a night. And it was all exciting, and people were saying like, we're gonna bid on it. We're gonna make this is kind of perfect. Then people were accusing me of doing it to like deliberately as well.
Oh, classic.
It's like as if I would do that, and
right. And just to explain here, so you're saying it turned into a club night because actually the venue for Dreamverse was at Terminal 5, which is actually a large concert venue in New York City, and what was an art gallery during the afternoon actually turned into an EDM concert at night. I think Alesso was headlining. It was a great show. But also, I think by this point, like I guess you hadn't sold this piece, but like it was about to be sold. Like someone was about this drop was about to launch, and so you had to deliver it. So when someone stole it, you didn't have this thing to deliver. Is that right?
That's right. Yeah. So in retrospect, it's kind of ridiculous because on that night, it was an image of the Basilisk was being projected on the side of a building in Times Square. Like it was huge projection of this like huge one-of-one NFT available at Dreamverse, Metageist and everything, and it had a working AR thing and everything, and it was really cool. So it was elevated on the outside, and then it was just like on a table in the corner and with not much light on it, like in the nightclub, and then of course it was nicked, like of course it was stolen. But yeah, so and then the auction was the next day. So I was like, it's stolen, but actually all of the value lies in the NFT, really. And as long as the buyer gets the NFT, then I will recreate it. And I actually recreated and made a much nicer one. We've got we went to a different plater and got one that was even better than the original. And we put weights in it, and we basically the one that the buyer got in the end was an improvement on the one that was stolen. But I also, as a sort of like literally a middle finger to the thieves, I changed the AR on the stolen one so that if they tried to use it, they just got an image of me with my middle finger up instead of the artwork that was supposed to show. And I also found out, I got a notification months later the stolen one was being used on New Year's Eve. Someone triggered the original
Oh my
QR
God.
code. So it's still being used somewhere, but there's no location data available because it's only one use for some reason, and I can't get any more news than that. So somewhere in the black market or in a bin or somewhere in New York, there's the original Basilisk, and it was triggered on New Year's Eve. So that was
wow. Someone was like throwing a New Year's Eve party and showing off that center.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, oh, here's a photo of it in Times Square on a building.
Yeah. No, it's
then,
fine.
Then he tries to show it, and it's just
not,
like a middle figure to himself.
Yeah, and ultimately they don't have the NFT. So I mean, if the future goes as well as I hope it does, then maybe I'll become a bigger and bigger name, and the stolen one will have some value. But at the moment, like, the value lies in the second one and in the NFT.
Totally, yeah. That really is a lost Indiana Jones artifact now.
Yeah.
Now, I do want to move on, but just before I do, I just wanted to get your reflection on why do you think someone why do you think someone saw it as like worth stealing? And I guess to me, like, it's such an interesting reflection on the difference in value, like perceived value between NFTs and physical items, because here you're saying that you say as the artist that, the real value is actually the one-of-one NFT that it's attached to, and this is like an important component, but you've actually been able to switch it so that, it's supposed to work the way it's supposed to work, and you've been able to reproduce the physical. So I don't know, have you thought about like why someone, thought that, stealing it would be beneficial to them or cool, or what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, a lot. I think about it all the time. Like it could just be someone just like knocked it into their bag and left because it was funny. Could be I honestly thought that somebody on the night, because everyone was so excited about the theft, I thought maybe someone's done this and then they're going to buy it and they're just like boosting the value of this. Maybe it's a bit of a play like that.
Yeah.
And then I thought, what if it's one of my friends who did it as a joke? Because there was quite a few of my mates there did it as a joke, and then when they saw people go, "This is amazing," thought, "Oh, we'll just keep it hidden." But then no one's ever come back.
A secret benefactor.
I thought, yeah.
They're like, they'll talk about this on podcasts forever. It's going to be great for his media.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So I don't know. I think it's disappointing. Basically, it's just like I can't imagine ever doing anything like that. So I do think it's quite sad. But the concept is what made it valuable to me.
Yeah.
What made it interesting was that it was a mixed reality artifact. It was both digital and real. And I actually love the fact that the original was stolen now. After going on a bit of an emotional roller coaster about the whole thing, it's like it's severely up and down at the time. Now it's just like it's part of what the Basilisk is now.
It's part of that provenance, right? And it's a really incredible story. I know if I had an NFT with a story as dramatic as that'd be more valuable to me. I didn't steal the Basilisk. I just want to say on record, it was not me. I was not involved in these plans.
Yeah, I've had, I've questioned everybody. It's really bad. Like, you do, like, in your darkest hours, it's just like it could have been them. It could have been them. I think I'd rather not know now. I think unless there's something really interesting about it, then it's just going to be an anticlimax when I find out that.
That's true.
Sells it on eBay for £50 next week. Like.
All right, let's talk about some other of your projects. Let's talk about the Metaphyla series. So this is the series that you have. I think it's so far exclusively on Nifty Gateway. I know you've released at least 2 different collections, and actually some of the aspects that you presented at NFT NYC were related to this. And this is one of the ones that I have. I actually currently have the Hydra, which is a little basilisk of itself, but I'm trying to get my hands on the cool splinter bug. That thing is awesome. So I'm so interested in this series because it has a narrative arc. So why don't you tell us about the Metaphyla series?
Yeah. So what I did when I saw this NFT thing happening, and I just thought, you know what, this. I was a VR art tutor at that point, and I was doing the art workshop and some sort of council-funded murals. Like, I do graffiti murals as well. I was painting murals and things like that. So I was kind of all over the place. But I saw an opportunity in NFTs, and I just thought this this doesn't come around. I actually thought about it a lot before I sort of started moving into the space, and I wanted to take an opportunity to do something I'd always wanted to do and give myself a fresh start. It was it's sort of my opinion that I really wanted to get into 3D. I'd only done VR stuff. I'd never done any 3D modeling at any point until Metaphyla.
Oh wow.
Basically, so, and you can kind of tell they're kind of like, you know, naive and kind of little ropey things, but I'd never used rendering software. I'd never textured stuff before, anything like that, and and they were $60 each when it dropped. And
oh my god,
really cheap,
those were the days.
It was a really cheap drop, and 250 of them. Took half an hour to sell, like 35 minutes or something like that to sell. The whole thing was extremely fun, like really, really awesome experience. The whole process of that with Nifty Gateway was really, really nice. But I was hands up. I was like, I'm new to 3D. I've got 20 years as an artist. I'm here for the long haul. Like, I've got a great sort of battle plan here. I've got an idea of what I want to do, but I'm a VR artist, and these are my first 3D models, and they're $60 each. Like, why don't you come on this journey with me? Collectors, like, that you can come in early. I'm not coming in. I'm competing in a sense with much more like experienced and talented 3D artists, and I could have come in doing Photoshop and 2D stuff, which you know, I was essentially an expert in for quite a long time. But I just thought, no, I'm just going to use this as an opportunity. I can reinvent myself. I can do some experimental things and to bring people along with me. So I started with simple organisms as well, because I'm fascinated by evolution, simulation theory, the metaverse, digital spaces, or digital augments of any kind. The fact that we are already sort of digital sort of cyborgs in a sense, and I'm really fascinated in scale, playing with scale as well. So. Like there's a Darwin quote that I don't know word for word, but essentially he says, like, if a stag beetle was the size of a car, it would be the most menacing animal on the planet. We sort of like, we tend to sort of look down upon arthropods and insects and, you know, things in the sea and stuff like that, but actually when you really look at them, they're absolutely fascinating creatures. So I thought that I would start my story with the basis of evolution. So I was inspired by the Cambrian explosion, when isopods and animals with eyes and legs and things started to evolve, and I thought this is like the start of the metaverse, and I'm going to make some little creatures that are a little bit of a nod to early life forms, and they will evolve over time. So the first series of Metaphyla is these 8 weird little creatures that are more or less, each piece is also improvised on the spot without any planning. In VR, because the plan is that the concept is that these are coming through me, inspired by nature, and also dictated by the restrictions of the software. So they're all made of hand gestures, and they're all made in one sitting, and they're all made without any reference images or anything like that. And you can kind of tell that's why they're so surreal and weird. So the idea is that I'm a conduit for the metaverse of the future, and that's what they became. They've all got little names. I've got a lot of love for all of them, and then I did another drop called Metamorphosis, where I show them evolving. Metamorphosis is one of my favourite drops. It's very sort of under sort of acknowledged because it's a bit weird. But what a lot of people don't recognise about Metamorphosis is that it's live video of me puppeteering. It's not an anime. It looks like a computer animation, but it's actually a recording of me puppeteering and transforming these creatures. Oh my god! In VR, but I've blanked myself out of it, so you can't tell that it's a live video. So it's a live recording. It's just sped up as well. It's like a time lapse thing. So that sort of like is a little representation of these creatures evolving. And then the second series, each of the characters in the second series, of 8 of them, is an evolutionary step up from the first lot. And now I'm at the third stage, where 4 of those are now at their fourth level of evolution. So like Soothsayer, which was the piece that I dropped while I was at Dreamverse, which is one of my favourite pieces, which is this really strange sort of humanoid creature with kind of like a golden crown around his head and stuff. He's actually the splinter bug. So the idea is like there was a teratoma, and then there's the splinter bug, and then he became the Soothsayer. And then there's the jellyfish, and then he became a jellyfish sort of monk character, and then he's ascending and spiraling into the sky as his third evolution. And so I've got these eight little strands of evolution that I just will continue. The temple hermit, who was a hermit crab, and then he became a temple. And now he's like a fully immersive metaverse space that you can put your artwork up inside. He's become a gallery, and he was sold. It's the only thing I've sold this year, actually, because it's the only bit of artwork I've finished so far this year. He was sold for 10 grand at auction on the Metaverse platform. So he started off as a little crab. Thanks. So he started off as a little crab, and now he's a gallery, and you can put your artwork inside the gallery. And at the moment, he's got all of his little brothers and sisters as giant floating sculptures inside his main room on his back. Cool. In space. That's cool. So yeah, it's all about this evolution thing.
Yeah. So I guess briefly, what's that about, evolving? Because as you were talking about evolving, it seems like you're really inspired by like organic evolution and seeing how creatures change. But it sounds like you took a more abstract approach when you evolved that character into architecture. It sounds like. So what's the thought process there?
I think of technology. And when I say technology, I think I'm including language, and I'm including fire, and like the earliest technologies are an extension of nature, and so I'm a firm believer in. Well, I quite like the idea that the animals will grow to prefer the machines over the people, like that. Like we're probably going to create this omnipotent AI, and this AI is going to know so much about the state of the planet that it's probably going to make better decisions than we would. And I think and technology in a sense could sort of nudge us out of the way in the long distant future, and improve upon the planet. So I think about technology as just a part of, it's just tools belonging to an animal that belongs to the planet that is grown on the planet. So all of the metaverse is an extension of animals, So I think that I see it as all one big thing. So they're not, they can work in harmony. So then I think, well, actually, I don't have to follow the rules of like survival of the fittest, and evolving to fit the environment like animals do, because we've got infinite space in all directions in the metaverse. We might as well go creative with it, even more.
You're so right, and we've sort of removed a lot of constraints that that led to natural selection, that led to the way that we in the world are now. But by inventing sanitation and all of the other ways that we've taken away methods of depopulation, you're right. We've sort of artificially removed these boundaries.
Antibiotics as well, and our diet just being able to
totally.
we live like kings, of course, and so great.
All right. So can you tell us about the Cyclops? That's such an interesting piece, and I know you've got interesting plans for that one as well. So what is the Cyclops?
So the Cyclops is it's a 3D printed
there it is
sculpture, and it's got an augmented reality sort of marker on the front, that a little radial augmented language thing that I designed.
So it's a little sphere with a QR code object that looks like an eye. Yes. Okay.
Yeah. It looks like a steampunk baseball robot eye.
Yes.
It sits on your desk, and the idea is that there's 21 Cyclops owners. They all this dropped after the last Metaphyla drop. It was the Hierophant drop. I wanted to make these for years. They were going to look slightly different to this, but I wanted to make them for years. But there was never a market for them. How was I going to sort of sell these things? I did not know. So as soon as I got into NFTs, I was always going to actually make Cyclops happen.
Wow.
I thought it was going to be years down the line, to be honest. But then I started collaborating with a 3D printer down the road from me, and then an old friend who had access to some excellent equipment. So these were cast in bronze. This is like a real bronze.
Oh my god!
And it's like a resin bronze, so it's like 50% bronze, 50% resin with a patina on it. And then there was an actual gold leaf one with real gold leaf as well.
Wait,
and a pearlescent one.
I thought you said it was 3D printed. Is it then plated in bronze, or what's the relationship?
Yeah, so 3D printed originally, and then we made a cast, and then we poured and made the original the sculptures, and they were all there was a lot of many hours put into each one, because they all had to be made, cast, checked, refined, polished. There's 21 of them. It was a big project for two people. But it was a huge success. They sold really quickly. They sold well. Everyone was really happy. I got 21 collectors, and then every so often I would send an email to the collectors, and they go to their Cyclops. They bring their phone. They open up an app, and then they just check out the artwork that's delivered to them. So it's like a It's like a curated exhibition of 3D art from inside a sculpture.
And how? So yeah, explain that. How are they seeing different art in relation to the Cyclops?
So I would change it periodically, sort of every week or every couple of weeks whenever a new piece was available. I spoke to Trippy Yogi, Sutu, Coldy, a bunch of quite big names in the NFT space. They all supplied art to me. And then they used Snapchat. They just loaded up Snapchat, pointed it at the Cyclops, and then got the artwork. If they clicked the artwork, it would open a link. So sometimes there was a free NFT for them. Sometimes it's NFT like available for them to purchase. So it was a way of introducing new artists to new collectors who were serious collectors.
Oh wow!
And then one of them was an audio, like a bespoke made 3-track album, like EP of music made specifically for the Cyclops owners and given away for free. Months of work went into that one. And so we got a friend of mine made a doom metal track for the Hierophant drop that the Cyclops was part of, and then 2 other artists made these really cool electronic remixes of those tracks, and there's like 21 copies of it, and they're only owned by the Cyclops owners. So it was a way of curating an exclusive digital art show through a physical sculpture that I don't think had been done before.
Totally. Yeah, and so just to reiterate that, so these people only the people who have the physical item in front of them who have bought, which were associated with NFTs. So you sold the NFTs on Nifty Gateway, you sent the physical items to the holders of those NFTs. So they now have this bronze cast item with a QR code in front of them on their desks. And then they get an email from you telling them, hey, check your app, there's something new here. And then they point their phone at the QR code on this eye, and they see something new. They might see some different 3D models from yourself or from one of these artists that you've collaborated with. So now you've delivered them, digital artwork that is actually specifically for them. And that's so interesting what you were talking about, how essentially you created a new gate. Because I'm so fascinated by the way that people are using NFTs as a way to gate access to different things. And typically we see that with like Discord channels, right? Like you buy an NFT and then through a bot, you are granted access to a private Discord server. But there's so many more possibilities here. And I'd never considered that actually you found a physical way to do that, which that's really amazing. So
it's a portal,
yeah,
basically.
Go ahead. Yeah,
it's a portal. It's your own little private portal, and
wow.
Yeah, it's the collectors really do appreciate it, which is really nice.
And have you built up relationships with all 21 of these collectors? What's that like, having such a small group of core supporters? I'm sure they're thrilled by essentially this ongoing support you're providing for this NFT they bought once upon a time.
Yeah, I think so. I think there's about 7 maybe of them that have not engaged with it at all, which has been disappointing. Okay. But I think people buy NFTs for all sorts of reasons, and totally. and to capture people's like attention is so hard anyway. But in the NFT space especially, so I think it didn't go entirely as I had hoped, in the sense that I should have had somebody else to manage the whole thing for me and sort of negotiate with the artists and get the artwork and write the emails and all that sort of stuff. So I've been doing it all entirely on my own, and I'm changing that this year. I'm expanding.
Yeah, that's a lot of work.
I'm becoming more of a running a studio where I'm the creative director, and delegating much more this year, because what I learned last year, because it essentially sort of broke me last year. Like after Dreamverse, I was broken for like 6 weeks. I couldn't and it was all for all the best reasons, but it was very, very tough to try and do everything on your own and try and do too much. I did too much on my own and promised too much. So I think a lot of the collectors are really appreciative and they're really stoked. And of course, in terms of like utility, like it's amazing. Like you're getting a lot more for your money. But I also think like it could have been. I could have like really made it more interactive and created more of a little community around it if I'd have been more on it, in terms of like getting feedback from them, maybe getting some of them to sort of send me artists they think I should get involved, and making it much more of something that they had ownership of as well. because that was initially the purpose was to create this it's called the Order of the Cyclops. So I did these like laser cut certificates on this like gold paper, and like they were like inaugurated into the Order of the Cyclops.
Wow.
But then it sort of trailed off a little bit over time because other projects came up and all that sort of stuff. But and now these were dropped. The Cyclops has dropped exactly 1 year ago today.
Wow.
And today's the anniversary of the Cyclops, so I've emailed everybody this morning and I've just sort of given them some hints as to what's coming next. And I'm doing a Nifty Gateway drop where the pieces in the drop are free only for Cyclops owners, and they're like some of my best work. It's a real step up in terms of the fidelity of the artwork, and they're just going to be free, and they're gifted to the 21 Cyclops owners.
So is that gifted to the holders of the physical items or the NFTs?
It has to be the NFTs because it's the only way Nifty Gateway can sort of prove it really.
So people.
There's been a few sales. There's been a few sales, and we run into this thing where I think one sale they didn't get the physical and they didn't mind. And because what's interesting is I can send them a QR code so they can still use it. So what if it's been, you can stick it onto like a tennis ball and it will still function. Yeah. It just won't look anywhere near as good. And one of them got posted it as well, and they got the physical as well. But it's one of those things where you can't really you can't lock them indefinitely, and it's up to the owners to decide whether or not they're going to part with the physical or not, and the buyer to decide whether or not they care enough.
Wow. Yeah, that's so fascinating. And I suppose that's like an additional dimension of value creation, right? Because we think about how, NFTs, I mean, one of the miracles of them is that you can get a cut of secondary sales, and we love the secondary market because of that. But if someone chooses to sell their physical, they can do that as well, and that's more value to the collector, which of course you wouldn't get a cut of, but that's how the world's always worked. Yeah. So
that's right.
Yeah. Great. Okay, so let's keep moving along here. So I wanted to ask about your history, because while we were talking at Dreamverse, you told me about how you had originally gotten into VR and what you were doing before that. And I wondered if you could just speak to the role that NFTs have played in your career, what you were doing before, and why it made so much sense to pursue NFTs when they came along.
Well, I think like a lot of graphic designers and commercial illustrators, I really just wanted to be an artist. I'm ADD, I'm very ADD, and very sort of like divergent thinker, and very easily distracted, and very imaginative and creative, but otherwise not not very good at timekeeping, and not very good at being told what to do, and like always just dreamt of just being able to earn a living from making my own weird artwork, and I saw that unfolding in the NFT space just over 2 years ago now. It was like February 2020. And it felt like a dream come true. So I just doubled down on it. I lived and breathed it. I listened to every podcast. I went on every blog. I looked at it. I went on Scent, which was a really cool place to sort of talk to artists and meet collectors and stuff at the time. And it panned out better than I could have ever had imagined. Yeah.
And what was it that when you heard about NFTs that spoke to you? Was it the idea of scarcity? Was it the idea of how did you see that applying to the work that you were already doing?
Well, I was making VR sculptures and VR environments that had no market whatsoever. There was no way of like selling that. Why, like, who was going to buy that? But once it was shown that people were interested in scarce, rare digital items, it suddenly became a lot more feasible. And also because the NFT space is full of people who are futurists and optimists and crypto native, and they're all about like breaking down these walls, removing the middlemen, and experimenting. So it was obvious that people were celebrating artists' weird selves. So they weren't going to like turn their nose up at like, what is this VR art? They were excited by the fact that somebody was putting on a headset, sculpting in VR, and then turning it into a sculpture that I could, because I was having events in VR chat underneath my sculptures, like pitching like a physical thing that was 10 feet tall to collectors at auction with super rare in VR in virtual environment space, and that whole thing was just like completely like really exciting because but essentially it was like I always wanted to use virtual reality tools to make my own artwork, and didn't know how I was going to sell them unless I was just going to make prints of them or whatever. Like you couldn't sell a video of
what do you do with that?
so,
yeah. And how were you, insofar as you were able to sell them or get someone to pay you for making artwork, how were you doing that before NFTs came along? I think you mentioned that you would actually, in at least one instance, you were drawing them on stage at a music festival.
Yeah. So I ended up becoming this like huge ambassador for VR art tools, to the point where I was doing talks at universities and running workshops. I find it very therapeutic, especially for someone who's very easily distracted. Like I can focus because I've got literally got blinkers on, and I can just look at the art, and that's the only thing there.
Oh, totally. All of your senses are focused on this one thing.
Like you're completely immersed in the creative process, and it's amazing, especially with music on. Like you can lose a day. Like it's wonderful. I love it, and I'm a huge ambassador for it. So I was literally taking it into hospitals. I went to Great Ormond Street in London. Went to the terminally ill ward, took VR headset and my computer, and worked with children in the ward. I did that in a bunch of different hospitals for charity, while doing workshops in schools with like classes of like 8 and 9-year-olds, and teaching them how to make paintings in VR and creating immersive sculpture parks for them and their parents to explore. And I was traveling to universities and teaching adults and basically introducing people to VR tools. And it was paying the bills just about, but it wasn't great. It wasn't, but I'd sort of like just chucked all of my time and effort into it. I bought very expensive equipment. I bought a 3D printer as well, and I was in debt actually, and a little bit worried, starting to become worried. And then NFTs just like pulled me out of that.
Right. It sounds like you were mostly selling your services because there wasn't actually so much of a market for the products. And obviously when you're selling services, that's something that doesn't scale. You've only got so much time and so much physical presence, right? So it sounds like Absolutely. It really filled a hole for the kind of art that you create or wanted to create. That's awesome. How does one build in VR? You said in your bio that you create art for the metaverse with metaverse native tools. What are those metaverse native tools, and how do you build?
Yeah, so essentially when you put the headset on and you load up a program, maybe Tilt Brush or Gravity Sketch, which is what I use now, you can pull a trigger in your controller and you can paint, and you will paint a ribbon or fire or whatever in the air in front of you, and it's there hanging in front of you in 3D, and your brain just accepts that it's a thing now, it exists. You can walk around it, and you can scale it up and get inside it, or you can shrink it down and hold it in your hand, and it's extremely intuitive. It's like sketching on paper or painting with watercolors, except it's digital, it's 3D, it's immersive, It's 3D printable, and you can scale it and save it and send it and copy it and do all sorts of stuff that you couldn't do with physical stuff. So it's like being a sculptor or a painter, but without gravity, without materials, and without any sort of restrictions. So it's, and what I do is I tend to put music on. I generally I still don't use any sort of images. Most of the time I just start with like a feeling, or like I improvise, and then I sort of draw until I see a shape that I like, and then I will tweak for ages afterwards. So with Gravity Sketch you can paint like a pipe. Say for instance, so you're painting like, I don't know, like an infinity symbol in the air. Mm-hmm. Once it's drawn, you can then go into that and you can move it and change the width and move all the points, and so you can really refine it. And then later on, and then after you've done that, you export it, and then you put it onto a flat screen at a desk using Blender or something similar to that, or Unity, and then you can change the lighting, the textures, the colors, the materials, and add music and all that sort of stuff. And that's what you can see in my Nifty Gateway portfolio is you can see me learning these processes. Like, oh, cool! You can see like it started off with the little evolution, bites, and then the evolution is shown as I'm learning new processes and stuff like that. Wow! And I'm still doing that now. The work I'm working on at the moment is all sculpted in VR first and foremost, and then I'm just I am just sort of getting better at making them feel bigger and more immersive and more interesting.
Yeah, and quick question there. So with these softwares, is there a particular VR headset that you use or that people must use to wear this, or are these like cross-platform apps?
Yeah, they're cross-platform now. So I use a Quest 2, which is the
Hmm.
cheapest headset you can get. Actually, it isn't great for prolonged periods. I do kind of miss the old one that was a lot lighter, but because it's got the wireless capabilities, it's got the computer in the front, so it weighs on your head a little bit. I've got I got a new head strap for it that makes it better. And it's got battery pack, and so I can last a lot longer, just like 4 hours or something like that. Um,
Wow.
But yeah, so and Gravity Sketch that I use for all my work is free as well. So like for $299, you can get the headset and get all the software that I've used on all of my Nifty Gateway pieces. Like
Wow.
because Blender's free as well.
Yeah, yeah.
You just have to be able to sit and learn and and enjoy the learning process, which I always do once I get started. It's the getting started that I find hard, and then once I get started, and as soon as I start to learn little bits, then that becomes really addictive, and the process is incredibly enjoyable. Then the anxiety starts to hit as you come up to the drop date, and you just think, "Am I an imposter? Am I a fraud? Is anyone going to
Yeah.
buy this? What if no one buys them?" And all that. And I actually haven't done that since Dreamverse, because the Monaverse space that I sold recently. Well, that's the only thing I've done since November.
Hmm.
But I've done a lot of writing and a lot of planning, and I'm really excited about what I've got coming up.
Oh, very cool.
But I haven't actually got a drop booked in exactly yet. But it's supposed to be like very very soon. It's just sort of like I'm spinning a lot of plates at the moment, and it's about to just like all kick off again.
Yeah, and
Which is
is this upcoming drop a VR drop?
Yeah, so I'm working with a collaborator on some new digital native creatures, and this one's actually my first versions were done in VR, but then we've worked on Houdini versions, so that they're actually like really complex and really animated.
Wow.
With really interesting geometry.
And
they're called
what's Houdini? I'm not familiar with that.
Oh, so Houdini is it's like industry level, like movie level 3D production suite
Oh,
that
okay.
uses geometry nodes. It's generative rather than modeling. So
Oh, wow.
by tweaking parameters and creating how would I describe it? You can create final pieces by just sort of setting parameters and physics and geometry using mathematics and sliders and all that sort of stuff, rather than physically creating every single sort of facet of the model. And it's very very cool. Like you
Yeah.
would use Houdini and Redshift for like creating an army in Lord of the Rings, or creating a tsunami
Sure.
through a city, or like it does these like really really high end like 5-star like proper highly finished stuff.
Wow.
And it's kind of ideal. But I've also got a couple of other things as well in the making, which are all handmade in VR by me.
Wow, very cool. Yeah, that software sounds so fascinating. I mean, the tools that we have more and more every day for like assisted artwork creation through AI is really incredible. I'm sure you've seen some of the demos. Maybe I saw you share it actually, but I think like for the new NVIDIA graphics card, there's some sort of app where you can just draw like the simplest possible geometrical scene of an outdoor landscape, and it will generate whatever. If you've drawn a sea, it'll fill in waves. If you've drawn a path, it'll fill in rocks, and it's really an incredible demo. I know that's a space that's very inspiring to you. So what have you been paying attention to there, and what's been inspiring you?
Oh God, I've just spent the last 2 weeks absolutely fascinated by AI art tools. So I was already using. You can get like a really really simple version of it on your smartphone called Wombo, and basically you can type into the phone what you want it to paint, and it will try and paint it. So that's a good example of like a very easy and accessible version of it. But essentially, there's a couple of different artificial intelligence models that work together beautifully now. So there's GPT-3, which is used for writing, and it's language recognition, and it's incredible. Like you can just give it a subject, and it will write a scientific paper or a poem or whatever, and it's very convincing.
So
And
this
then
is an
there's
artificial
also
intelligence model.
yeah, yeah.
Okay.
GPT-3. It's going to disrupt everything from journalism through to scientific papers, and
Oh
especially
wow.
fiction, and it's very convincing, and it's kind of creepy and excellent at the same time. And then there's like diffusion models and GANs, general adversarial networks, which are image recognition models, and I don't know anything about the high level of this at all. I've just been playing with it and trying to understand it. But basically, you can now have tools. There's one called Midjourney that I've been using every day for like 14 days now to create paintings for a whole other world that I'm trying to build, which is separate to the Metaverse stuff. Which is called Thorax, and it follows life forms on another planet populated by giant insects.
Wow.
So with Midjourney, you can paint in what you want to see. So I've been putting like Aztec samurais on the backs of jumping spiders, and it paints it, and it takes 60 seconds.
Oh my
and
god.
It does four in 60 seconds, and then you refine it, and you choose the one you like, and then you do it again and again and again until you actually refine it. So it can take hours. Possibly as long as a good concept artist would take to create the same art, but the AI is doing it for you, and you can have 5 of these going at once, and you can just create all this artwork, and it's spooky. But then there's DALL-E. Now DALL-E, DALL-E, as in Wall-E and Salvador Dali, is the crazy one, which is just going to completely disrupt the creative industries this year. Only 200 people are allowed to use it. But it takes a second to create photorealistic images based on your descriptions, and it handles really surreal stuff beautifully.
Wow.
And I don't think people fully appreciate just how powerful this has got, and how quickly it's got this powerful is pretty incredible. And so I don't know how DALL-E is going to fund it or who's going to allow access to it, but stock photos, paintings, concept artists, anyone doing static stuff should either be embracing it or scared of it, as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah.
It's beautiful and creepy as hell as well, because it's so good.
Well, I wanted to ask you about that, since I think you've been paying more attention to this area, excuse me, than a lot of people have, and it seems like you've thought about the downstream effects of this. So, with artificial intelligence getting so good at creating art, let's imagine that there are AI artists that soon come on the scene, and I'm sure this will happen. I think there's already, like virtual artists that are some sort of machine-based intelligence. But say they start selling artwork of themselves, one could make an argument that that's the machines coming for creative jobs, right? But since you've thought so much about this, like where do you see this going? And I think, my guess would be that for some people, if you make certain types of artwork, that's, fairly easy for a machine to understand. And now we know that like landscape photography might be one of those. Yeah, you might have more competition, but, you've talked so much today already about how machines are sort of an extension of our brains. So, how do you see this disrupting the art world, and not just the industries you've already said, like journalism and stock photography?
Yeah, well, I do know that some of the earliest NFTs on Super Rare were AI paintings, like
Really? Wow.
about a year before I came onto the scene. So like it was all like artists and I suppose AI programmers have been sort of putting art out there for a while. There's a collection called the Lost Robbies, and they are like these really unusual AI paintings that were, I think if I remember rightly, they were given away free at an NFT event before my time, and now they're like some of the highest, most valuable NFTs because they're early in the NFT space, but they're also AI paintings.
Oh wow.
So they've already infiltrated. I came to the realization, and this is literally just yesterday, that some of my absolute favorite art in the world ever is the AI art paintings that I've been doing, and they're not mine. It's not me painting them, but because I'm getting to sort of like weave this like magic spell and create these characters and vistas and landscapes and stuff based on what's in my head, and it's better. I can't paint that well. I get there eventually, but I'm not a painter. The fact that it's coming out and it's what I want to see, I'm just like, it's blowing my mind. I just keep sort of staring at these paintings with my aghast and trying to sort of like reconcile what this is and how like poignant it is.
Wow.
I think people have been warned about robots taking our jobs for a long time, and you know, automation is a big part of that. But I think even people in the NFT space and in the crypto space and very forward-thinking people are still like very sort of ignorant to just how good they are and how quickly they're evolving. Like in the space of a year, the fidelity and the speed and just the finesse of these algorithms as evolving has been sort of pretty mind-blowing. So I think like artists, like anybody who is painting on an iPad, anything, is going to run into competing, especially in the NFT market, competing with people who are just paying to use an AI painter and coming up with things that objectively are just as good. Like, and obviously it was all subjective, and a lot of people are going to probably rally against that and try and find like the artists that have spent months painting things and all that sort of stuff. But the biggest place it's going to really, the biggest thing is where people need concept art for a broader project. So if someone's making a movie or a comic or or anything like that, a TV series or a music video or anything, they always have to start with sketches and concept art. And now they're just going to be able to log into it's Discord. Midjourney, you use Discord bots and you type in what you want and it just paints in a Discord chat.
Wow,
and goes,
that's amazing. That's amazing.
And that costs $36 a month to use that. And it's instant, so wow. It's significant, and it's going to be incredibly disruptive when it becomes like mainstream, when newspapers and magazines are, and also it's going to be very dangerous because you're going to be able to just put like choose a celebrity or the president or whatever, put them in a like compromising situation, because DALL-E does photorealistic stuff very well. You can tell just about at the moment that it's not quite real, but it's very close, especially in terms of like the way we don't really look closely at things anymore as we scroll past things on our phone and stuff. You don't even need to get someone who's good at Photoshop or anything to make these things. You can just get an AI to create them. So there's going to be lots of like discussions about the ethics behind these things, I think.
Yeah.
And you can do 3D. There's already people manifesting 3D objects in the same way. So it's not just static images. And then with deepfakes as well. Deepfake, again, are an example of algorithms and AI. Obviously, I don't entirely know exactly how it works, but it knows how to map a face and it knows how to find a face, and it uses thousands of images that people have put up willingly on the internet. And for instance, if I want to create artwork in Midjourney, I can type in the name of 20 artists that I like, and it will do it in a style as if all 20 of them had worked together on it. As like
wow.
So you've got this other sort of like discussion there about like, well, should that artist get something for that? Like, or is it or is it the equivalent of inspiration? Because artists will rip off other artists unknowingly because they're just so inspired, or and so it's very, very weird. And I just think we're starting to create this. I don't know, these AIs that are. The genie is out the bottle now. If not, it will be soon, and then there's no turning back. And that's fascinating to watch unfold.
Yeah, you have me reflecting as you were talking about how easy it's become for you to like weave a fantasy world and get it from your brain into like virtual physical space with barely a thought. I think ultimately, I mean, what is a tool? A tool is, it helps us do things more efficiently. And so essentially it's reducing the amount of work that it takes a person to, make whatever fantasy that they have in their head. And, that, as you say, there are very scary applications of that. But I think there's also very exciting things, because the more efficiently we can do things, the more intricately and the larger we can do them. So, I mean, obviously in video games, your average RPG is just a sprawling world now, so huge. And that's thanks to the tools we have. And a lot of it is AI generated, like landscapes, right? Like, they didn't code in every rock and river and tree.
No. It's just a bunch of algorithms, and they just say how hard they want the gravity to have effect on the trees and rocks that they just chuck in.
Okay, so let's talk a little bit about metaverses. It's such a hot topic right now, and I feel like you're the right person to speak to them. So first, I want to stop and ask, what does the metaverse mean to you?
Um, for me, I think the metaverse has existed since the very first messaging apps on the internet. So I think it's something that isn't coming. I think it's something that's already here. I think the fact that I get told that I sometimes spend 10 hours a day at my phone, which is absolutely insane. And that is enough for me to think that I'm already like one foot on the grid, is the way I put it. Like I'm in the metaverse. I think people need to admit that.
Right.
It isn't about. I don't like. It really bothers me that people talk about Ready Player One, like this thing that we're all hoping to achieve. And because there's far more creative sort of representations of what we could do in the metaverse. I think of it as one thing, and I also think that metaverse. I'm starting to think of it as a time rather than anything else, because I reckon in a decade's time, people won't talk about the metaverse because it will just be part of everyday life as we put on our AR goggles and talk to our robot in the house or whatever, or our car,
Right.
for instance.
Yeah.
All of these interconnected objects that are all represented by a digital artifact, or a physical thing, they all cross over. And I mean, children have been brought up now with screens since they were born, with the internet since they were born, and with social lives existing in games like Roblox and Minecraft, and these are all metaverse. And I think the metaverse is the internet and any way of relating to digital spaces, but with any way of humans relating to digital spaces is the metaverse. So it's existed since ICQ Messenger or whatever, and it's like World Wide Web, or like information superhighway or whatever. Like, it's a term that is relevant now that won't be soon, because it will just be a given that we're digital creatures.
So it sounds like you think the metaverse is digital social connection writ large, and it probably started in the earliest eons of the internet. Those were the foundations, and we're just getting more and more towards an immersive, I guess, and natural digital space.
Yeah,
I guess,
I don't think there's plural. I think it's all the metaverse, and people will disagree with me, sure. But I mean, if you're editing a Google Doc and you can see the other cursor moving, that you're in the metaverse, and that's an avatar. That's a representation of somebody somewhere else in the world, and you're sharing an environment together, which happens to be an A4 sheet of digital paper.
Yeah. Earlier you were talking about when you're creating art in the metaverse, one reason it works for you, perhaps because you said you are so ADD and easily distracted, is that you've got blinkers on, you've got this over your face, right? You've got, all of your senses are enveloped in it. And I think that's amazing, and that's its own sort of miracle. I have my own VR set, and I find that really great that you can literally immerse yourself in a game. But that's also very time consuming, as I think you alluded to earlier. And I think that's also sort of a barrier to entry to that form of VR. So I just wanted to ask you about, like, how do you see VR and AR sort of converging? Because I guess in my mind, like, VR is when you're like fully immersed in it, and AR is when you're taking these like 3D aspects and mapping it onto your world. So I see it as sort of a continuum between like absolutely physical to AR to VR. And how do you see that changing, or how do you see that spectrum really sort of filling up as we get towards like a more VR based environment?
Yeah, a couple of years ago there was this ongoing discussion about whether we should start just saying XR instead for extended reality, or MR, it's mixed reality, and like AR and VR are always mentioned in the same breath, but actually are really quite different. And I think actually probably this year we're going to see an update to the popular VR headsets where you can flick between the two in the same headset.
Wow.
With Gravity Sketch on the Quest that I already use, you can already turn the cameras on, and I can sculpt, and I can see the room around me, and I've got the sculpture in the room around me. It's just in black and white. The depth perceptions are pretty dodgy, and it's low res.
Yeah.
But it's the start, and the next one that we already know that the next one's going to have pass through. So AR and VR they are, as a lot of people expected, they're just going to blend, and I think all we need is, and I say we need, like this is something that's essential to us, but I actually do think we need it, because I think we've grown up in this really weird time where there's been a decade of people staring down at a little thing in their hand, and there's this like real bandwidth problem where everything gets slower because you've got to type on a screen, and and that whole thing is very sort of, it's going to look very silly very soon, in the same way that 80s mobile phones look silly, and VR headsets are going to look very silly as well. But I do think that the software is there, and the way that we relate to it is that we are already cyborgs. There's just this weird sort of clunky bandwidth problem between our hand, a screen, and a face, and a thing in a pocket, and all that sort of stuff. And all we need is for that thing to be on over our eye instantaneously, or otherwise lower bandwidth, and we're going to really start to feel like the cyborgs that we grew up with seeing in the sci-fi.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think it's really soon. I think it's, people have been saying that for like 5 years or whatever, but it looks like there's patents for glasses for Facebook, for Apple, and the Oculus Quest is going to have pass through. So it looks like this year, or like within the next 2 years, it's going to start sort of becoming a thing that people just start to understand. People laughed at iPads, and people laughed at iPhones, and people laughed at earpods and all these things because they just thought, it's an advert for theft, or it's a ridiculous concept, no one's going to use it, and then before you know it, everybody's got a smartphone, or everybody understands the utility of a tablet now. And
totally.
it's going to be like that.
Yeah, when you were talking earlier about creating art and how you can just like put your hand out into the space and pull a trigger and draw something in the air, I was thinking about how when the iPhone came out, it was actually really revolutionary to be able to touch your finger to the screen and be able to flick it and actually interact with it. And now, I mean, that almost seems like primitive to us with the tools that we have, and it will even more so in the future. But like, to be able to remove an intermediary tool like a button or a stylus and just use your finger was like actually quite a leap in terms of being able to interact with something. And obviously I think with VR tools like the ones you're using to sculpt, that's another step down that path.
I remember seeing the video of the first iPhone, and when they pinched to zoom the map, it was just mind blowing. And that seems so ridiculous now because it's everywhere as a gesture. Yeah. I mean, you use it in VR. The Quest 2, I don't even need the controllers for a lot of it. I can just use my fingers in the air. It already has that.
Wow, I didn't know that.
Yeah, it already has hand tracking. It's just that most of the apps don't utilize it because there's a lot more buttons. There's a lot more buttons on the controllers. So if you put your headset on and you don't have the controllers, it knows you don't have the controllers, and it maps little digital gloves onto your hands, and you can just use the menus and you just pinch, and you literally pinch and pull like you do on a screen. It's already like proper sci-fi out there.
That is amazing.
and that's on the cheapest headset.
Yeah, one thing I do love. Do you have the game Demio? Have you played that?
Yeah, I've played it a lot. I love Demio.
It's so great. And I love, like, one of my favorite things about it is that you can, like, either play it from a tabletop perspective, and I should stop and explain that this is a tabletop RPG in VR world. It's made to be like Dungeons and Dragons, but because it's in VR, you don't have to play it like a tabletop game, but you can, like Lee is saying, you can actually, like, pinch your hands and pull and expand space until you're at the same scale of these.
You go down into the dungeon with the hero. Yeah.
It's incredible. So suddenly,
it's very, very fun and very immersive. I wouldn't have expected something like that, like a board game in VR. Like that, I would have laughed at that if I hadn't have seen so many good reviews. I was just like, okay, I have to try this, and it's brilliant. It's brilliant. It's really
so fun. And such a fun way to play with friends as well, when you're all like literally there in virtual space. You can see their hands, you can see their helmets. Like, wow, it's incredible. And you're drawing and saying, go over here. You're like circling something in the air.
And that's how the art programs work. That's exactly how the painting works. It just stays there afterwards.
Wow, very cool. All right, so I think we should start to bring it home. I've got a silly little game to play with you called Tired or Inspired. I'm going to throw a word at you, and I just want you to say whether to you that thing is tired or inspired.
Okay.
Easy enough? All right.
Yeah, I'm both right now, I can tell you that.
Yeah, I feel that. All right. First up, VR gaming.
I would say inspired. I think it's got a long way to go, but it's a very broad subject. So there's some games that work really well, and I don't think people are going to be spending like all day in an MMO in VR anytime soon.
Okay. Virtual land worlds.
Or virtual real estate model tired, virtual worlds inspired.
Oh, very good. Very good. I like that. My boyfriend would have a lot to say on that subject of virtual real estate. Yep. NFT avatar projects, profile picture projects.
Oh, tired, but I don't think they're going to go away anytime soon. It's
Interesting.
A very easy thing to understand.
Okay. Instagram.
Hanging in there, but tired.
Zuckerberg.
Oh God. Hardwired.
Twitter.
Twitter's been amazing. Like that's where NFT community lives, and I think it's inspired. I don't know how it's going to change over the next 12 months or so. That's going to be interesting. But
so
inspired.
you know, my next one is Elon Musk.
Oh God, my opinion of him changes every day. Like it flips between like, and I'm just like I watch an interview when they're talking about the things he's actually building and him and his team are building, and it's just like inspired. And then he just like. I don't know, like he's a maverick, isn't he? So he pisses me off as well. He's tired and inspired, depending on his mood.
Maybe hardwired too.
Yeah. And I love it. I love the idea of like 1,000 ships going to Mars in my lifetime, which is what he's planning on doing. And I think people need to be thinking like that, and I love that, and that's inspirational. But he's also like a massive troll, and he annoys me.
All right, roadmaps.
Oh, yeah. I don't know. Tired mostly. I've watched 100 roadmaps not be fulfilled, and a lot of promises not be like fulfilled. And I think like this is why I focus on artists, because they're the roadmap. That's all you need to know, because generally artists just have to be doing it. They could just to stay happy. They will always create. So. So roadmaps generally tired, but I think we'll have to see who delivers on their roadmaps, and some of the big players are just not going to. I just don't think they're going to, especially Metaverse stuff. People don't realize how hard it is to make a game. Like,
NFT galleries.
Oh, inspired. I think even an NFT gallery on a flat screen in a website is a great way of elevating art. But I want to see more physical galleries do a better job of displaying their NFTs, like elevating them to in such a way that they deserve, because at the moment most real world galleries are kind of tired and aren't really making the most of projectors and AR and all that sort of stuff. So yeah, tired in the real world, inspired in the digital world, and I think there's a space in between there that's going to really flourish soon.
New York City pizza.
Inspired. Yeah. First thing we did when we arrived after 2 weeks in Barbados was get like a really huge, dirty, greasy pizza up over the road from the hotel, and it was it was amazing. It was amazing.
That was your first time in the US, right?
In New York. I'd been to the US before.
In New York,
it was my first time. Yeah.
Okay.
Well, it was absolutely broken, but it was just like holy grail. Like, we'd arrived. We sat on the steps of the hotel eating like giant greasy like. We had better pizza after that, but that pizza was special.
Yes, it always is. All right. So very, very briefly, what's next from you? What should people look out for from you soon?
I've got the drop that's going to be gifts for the Cyclops is going to be like the first instance of a much larger story that I want to tell with these new creatures, and I'm really excited about that. I'm doing a collaboration with Varian, Nikki, who did the sound for the Basilisk.
Shout out Varian.
I've got a piece on my screen now, but I'm not going to show it because it's looking a bit ropey. But because I'm working on it at the moment, that's like a really cool looping piece as part of a group show. And she's got some really cool artists as part of that show, but I don't want to drop any names at the moment because it's a bit early days, but it looks like it's going to be amazing. And what else? There's another thing. Oh god, so there's this I can't say the name of the event because it's not like It's not definitely happening yet, but I've been asked, and I'm in the middle of quoting for 400 Cyclopses for a huge crypto event this year.
Wow.
And that's working hopefully with Metaverse on like physicals.
Amazing.
So that's potentially huge, but it's just slow moving because it's big. And then there's another thing. Oh yeah, there's another big thing where I'm working with like a traditional fintech investment firm on an iPhone app. They want some creative direction and some artwork NFTs for that, and that looks like it's gonna be huge as well. But
wow.
Yeah, so I got like these big projects about to start, and a lot of sketches and a lot of art that I want to do this year as well. If everything that's lined up now happens, then I'm done for the year already. Like I'm fully booked like until the end of the year, and
amazing.
That's really, really cool. But
yeah,
I haven't got any curatorial roles lined up yet or any. Oh yes, I have. I'm curating a show for First Dibs as well in August. It's going to be like a year after the first one I did for them, which was a really cool exhibition that I worked with them on. But yeah, quite a lot of stuff.
Very, very cool. Yeah, and I figure curation-wise, people can just check out your profile. And I think you're on Tezos as well. I know, like, I do a lot of random buying on Tezos because there's so much great art on those marketplaces there. Speaking of, where can people find you online?
Yeah, so I'm on Nifty Gateway and Super Rare and Maker's Place and Rareable and OpenSea and Object and Tezos, and it's Metageist everywhere, so it's easy to find, and it's like the only use of the word, so you can Google Metageist and you won't find anything else. So it's just basically all my weird creepy logo and all my artwork, and
Sweet.
Yeah, and that's it. Yeah, Instagram. I'm gonna get back into doing stories on Instagram. I haven't been using it lately, but I do like enjoy that for behind the scenes stuff. But it's all on Twitter.
Awesome. Yeah. And of course, while you guys are rating social media, go ahead and give me a follow as well. Niftyist, Niftyist, everywhere. Lee, thank you so much for coming on the show. What a great conversation. Really appreciate it. And
really enjoyable. I appreciate being asked.
Yes, I'm so glad to have you as the inaugural guest, because it's just been so great, and I think it's a very auspicious start. And I would be remiss if I didn't put out a call to subscribe to the podcast. If you haven't already, go ahead and rate it, and a review would be amazing as well. Thank you so much, Lee. Thank you, everyone, for listening, and we'll catch you next time on the Niftyist Podcast.